My name is Jack Miller, and this is not some Hollywood fairy tale. It's the kind of story men like us, hardworking, 30 to 60, who've given everything for love, hope we'll never have to live through. But I did. My wife Emily cheated on me. Not with a stranger, not with some random guy she met at a bar, but with the man her own mother handpicked for her at a charity gala in Dallas. And if that wasn't enough, she got pregnant, and then begged me to be the father. For 4 years, I thought I knew what love meant. I built a life with her, stood by her side, worked my hands to the bone to provide. But that night at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, I dropped the truth on her family so hard, the entire table froze. This isn't about revenge, it's about reality. And if you've ever wondered how far betrayal can go, listen closely. This is my story. People talk about love like it's something out of a Hollywood movie. Grand gestures, expensive rings, private jets, and perfect sunsets. That's not love. That's advertising. Real love, the kind I believed in, doesn't need a script or a soundtrack. It shows up in the quiet moments no one else sees. Real love is standing in line at Walgreens at 2 in the morning because she's sick and only ginger ale will settle her stomach. Real love is remembering she hates cilantro and telling the waiter every single time, "No cilantro, please," even when he rolls his eyes. Real love is driving 3 hours through Texas traffic just because she once mentioned craving a cupcake from a bakery across town. It's not glamorous, it's not flashy, but it's steady, it's dependable, and it's the kind of love I thought would last forever. What I didn't know was that for Emily, and her mother, it was never enough. I wasn't rich. I didn't have a corner office or some shiny degree to hang on the wall. What I had were these hands, calloused, scarred, tired, and I used them every day to build a life for us. When Emily got sick at night, I didn't think twice. I'd grab my keys, head to the 24-hour pharmacy, and come back with Pepto-Bismol, saltine crackers, and her favorite ginger tea. I wasn't playing the hero, I was just being the man she needed in that moment. When her car broke down, I left work early, picked her up outside her office, and drove her home. When she was stressed after long days in her marketing job, I gave her shoulder rubs until she fell asleep. Those weren't grand gestures. They were small, constant choices, proof that love isn't about saying, "I love you" once. It's about proving it every damn day. But in Emily's world, those small things were never enough. One time, Emily casually mentioned missing those fancy cupcakes from a boutique bakery in Austin. She didn't even ask me to get them. It was just an offhand comment, something she probably forgot the moment it left her lips. But I didn't forget. A week later, I drove 3 hours through Texas traffic, burned half a tank of gas, and came back with a white box tied in ribbon, filled with those overpriced cupcakes. Her eyes lit up when I handed them to her, like I'd just brought back a treasure chest. And in that moment, every mile was worth it. That's what love was to me, remembering the small things, the throwaway details, the quiet hints that no one else would notice. I made it my mission to turn those details into proof that I was paying attention, that she mattered. I thought those gestures built us a foundation. I thought they meant security, but to her family, they meant nothing at all. My name's Jack Miller. I'm 29 years old, and I run Miller's Auto, a European car repair shop in Dallas. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I built it from the ground up, one busted knuckle, one late night, one stubborn repair at a time. People with money bring me their over-engineered nightmares. BMWs that need software updates just to change the radio, Audis that throw tantrums if you look at them wrong, and Mercedes that cost more to maintain than most folks' mortgages. I fix them all, and I'm damn good at it. I didn't inherit this shop. I didn't buy it with daddy's money. I earned it through sweat, grease, and years of refusing to quit when every part screamed at me to walk away. That's who I am. Not a trust fund baby, not a corporate suit, but a man who works with his hands and keeps his word. I thought that was enough for Emily. For her mother, it was never even close. Dallas is full of people who like to show off. Big houses in Highland Park, designer clothes, and cars that cost more than some folks' entire yearly salary. That's where I come in. At Miller's Auto, I'm the guy they call when their status symbols break down. A hedge fund manager's BMW that refuses to start, a lawyer's Audi flashing a dozen warning lights, or a surgeon's Mercedes whining like a spoiled kid. Most shops turn their noses up at these jobs. Too complicated. Too risky. Not me. I take pride in digging into those machines, diagnosing what others can't, and sending them back onto the road better than new. Every bolt tightened, every code reset, every job done right. The irony? Those same rich folks trusted me with their cars, but Emily's mother never trusted me with her daughter. To her, greasy hands meant small dreams. She saw me as a mechanic, nothing more, while I was building an empire one repair at a time. Her name was Emily Carter, and for 4 years she was my whole world. She wasn't just beautiful, though she was, with blonde hair that caught the Texas sun and green eyes sharp enough to stop me mid-sentence. It was her laugh that did me in, though. Light, airy, the kind that filled a room and made you forget whatever had been weighing you down. Emily worked in marketing, always polished, always put together, the kind of woman who could walk into a boardroom and hold her own. But when it was just us, curled up on the couch watching some awful rom-com, I saw a softer side. She'd tuck her feet under my leg, steal my fries without asking, and grin like she owned me. And truth is, she did. For 4 years, every decision I made had her at the center. I thought I'd found forever. What I didn't realize was that forever meant something very different to Emily and to her family. I still remember our first dates like snapshots burned into my mind. The late-night drives around Dallas with the windows down, her hair flying wild in the wind while she sang off-key to country songs on the radio. The way she'd laugh at herself when she missed half the lyrics, then nudge me to join in. We spent hours wandering through farmers markets on Saturdays, her tasting every sample like it was a 5-star meal, me just happy to carry the bags. I remember her face the first time I surprised her with takeout from that little Italian place she loved. Overpriced pasta, bad service, but worth every penny just to see her smile. Those early days were full of simple magic. Nothing dramatic, nothing complicated. Just two people in love, discovering each other, building routines that felt like the start of forever. Back then, I believed every laugh, every kiss, every small moment was proof we were unshakable. I couldn't have been more wrong. Every Friday, without fail, I stopped at Main Street Florist on my way home. It didn't matter if I was dead tired from a 12-hour shift under the hood of a Mercedes, or if the Texas heat had me drenched in sweat. Friday meant flowers. Emily loved white roses mixed with baby's breath. At first I'd pick them out myself, fumbling with arrangements. But after a while, Mrs. Turner, the sweet old woman who ran the shop, started setting them aside for me. She'd smile when I walked in, already holding the bouquet, like she knew my routine better than I did. I'd bring them home, and Emily's face would light up like it was the first time, every time. She'd laugh, kiss me on the cheek, and put them in that same glass vase on the kitchen counter. To me, those flowers weren't just roses, they were promises. I thought traditions like that built a future. To her family, they were just cheap gestures from a man who'd never measure up. Back then, I truly believed what we had was unbreakable. Every smile, every Friday bouquet, every small sacrifice stacked up in my mind like bricks in a house we were building together. I wasn't just dating Emily. I was planning a future with her. I saw us in a little house outside Dallas, kids running in the yard, Sunday mornings with coffee and the paper, her laugh echoing through the rooms we'd fill with memories. I believed that kind of love, the steady, everyday kind, was stronger than money, stronger than status, stronger than anything her family could throw at us. I thought patience and devotion would outlast doubt, that one day her mother would look at me and finally see what Emily saw, a man who loved her without condition. I built my life around that belief. I bet everything I had on it. And that blind faith, believing love was eternal, was the very thing that set me up for heartbreak. Then there was Linda Carter, Emily's mother. If Dallas had a queen of appearances, it was her. Always dressed like she was headed to a country club luncheon, pearls around her neck, hair salon perfect every day of the week. She carried herself like the world was her stage, and the rest of us were just background actors. Linda wasn't interested in love stories or hard work. She was obsessed with status. To her, success was measured in stock portfolios, square footage, and the badge on the hood of your car. If you didn't belong to her world of charity galas and gated communities, you weren't worth her daughter's time. From the very first dinner I shared at their house, I felt it. That silent judgment, like she was scanning me head to toe, tallying up all the ways I didn't belong. I thought maybe, eventually, she'd soften. That if I proved myself enough, she'd see I was worthy of Emily. But Linda Carter wasn't a woman who softened. Family dinners at the Carters' house always felt less like a meal and more like a courtroom. The The chandelier light, the polished silverware, the perfectly plated salmon, it was all theater. And I was always on trial. Linda had a way of making her insults sound like friendly advice. One night she leaned across the table with that plastic smile of hers and said, "Jack, dear, you might want to wash your hands more thoroughly. There's still a little grease under your nails." I'd been working all day at the shop. Of course there was grease. To me, those stains were proof of honest work. To her, they were a disease she might catch if I touched the china. Emily would squeeze my hand under the table, giving me that apologetic look that said, "Ignore her, she doesn't mean it." But she did mean it. Every word, and every bite of food felt like swallowing another reminder. In Linda's eyes, I'd never be clean enough for her daughter. If my hands were never good enough for Linda, neither was my truck. I drove a Ford F-150, nothing fancy, but reliable as hell. That truck hauled engines, lumber, groceries, you name it. It was my workhorse, my pride, and in Texas, an F-150 is about as American as it gets. But to Linda, it was just another sign that I didn't measure up. At one dinner, she glanced out the window, her eyes narrowing at my truck parked in their pristine driveway. Then, with that same syrupy tone she always used, she said, "Don't you think it's time for something more professional, Jack?" Her gaze slid deliberately to the curb, where Bradley Prescott's gleaming BMW sat like a trophy. The implication was clear. Real men drove imports with leather seats and chrome badges. My F-150 was just another mark against me. I smiled and let it pass, but inside her words burned. To me, that truck represented freedom. To her, it represented failure. It didn't take long before Linda started dropping Bradley Prescott's name into every conversation like it was seasoning she couldn't resist. Bradley was the golden boy of Houston real estate, 34, perfect teeth, a trust fund cushioned under his self-made empire. He drove a Bentley, lived in a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows, and wore suits that probably cost more than my monthly payroll. To Linda, Bradley wasn't just impressive. He was the standard. At dinner, she'd casually say, "Bradley just acquired another property downtown," or, "Did you know Bradley speaks 3 languages?" Her smile would linger on Emily as if she was planting seeds in her daughter's mind. And then came the direct comparisons. "Jack, have you ever thought about diversifying your income? Bradley has such a clear 5-year plan." I'd bite my tongue, smile politely, and let it slide. But every word chipped away at me. I wasn't competing with another man. I was competing with an ideal her mother had handpicked. Soon it felt like Bradley Prescott had a permanent seat at the Carter dinner table, even when he wasn't physically there. No matter the topic, Linda managed to steer the conversation back to him. If Robert mentioned the stock market, Linda would chime in, "Bradley was just telling me about a brilliant investment strategy he's using in Houston." If Emily talked about her job, Linda would smile and add, "Bradley's firm handles marketing so differently. You should hear his ideas." Even when dessert came out, she found a way. "Bradley's mother Eleanor makes the most divine pecan pie. We must invite them over." I sat there, chewing my food, listening to this invisible guest of honor dominate every meal. Emily would roll her eyes at me later, whispering, "You know how Mom is." But the damage was done. Bit by bit, Linda wasn't just comparing me to Bradley. She was trying to rewrite Emily's future with him in the lead role. After every dinner, it became a ritual. We'd get into my truck, Emily would grab my hand, and before I even started the engine, she'd sigh, "I'm sorry. You know how Mom is." Her words were soft, her fingers warm against mine, but they weren't enough. Because what she never did, what I needed her to do, was speak up in the moment. Not once did Emily turn to her mother at that glossy dinner table and say, "Stop, respect the man I love." Instead, she'd squeeze my hand under the table, shoot me those guilty looks, and let Linda's comments stand. To her, that was easier, keeping the peace, smoothing things over once the damage was already done. I told myself it was because she loved her family too much to fight them, that she was caught in the middle, that patience on my part would prove my worth. But the truth? Her silence said more than her apologies ever could. So I bit my tongue. I smiled through the insults, swallowed the bitterness, and told myself patience would win in the end. I'd seen stubborn engines give way after hours of careful work. Surely a woman like Linda Carter could soften if I just kept showing up, proving myself day after day. I thought consistency would matter, that every bouquet of Friday flowers, every late-night pharmacy run, every mile I drove for Emily would eventually outweigh the dirt under my fingernails or the Ford parked in their driveway. I believed that if I showed Linda the man her daughter already saw, the one who loved her with everything he had, she'd have no choice but to come around. In my mind, love wasn't just about passion, it was about persistence. And persistence always paid off. At least that's what I told myself. What I didn't realize was that my silence wasn't noble. It was teaching her I'd accept anything, no matter how deep the cut. I carried this idea in my chest like a shield. Love conquers all. It sounded noble, almost romantic, and I clung to it whenever Linda's words cut deeper than I let on. When she dismissed my work as blue collar, I told myself love would prove her wrong. When she gushed over Bradley Prescott's latest business deal, I thought love would tip the scales back in my favor. Love was supposed to be stronger than money, stronger than pride, stronger than a mother's ambition. I believed that if I just kept loving Emily with everything I had, the world, her mother included, would have to bend. That patience, devotion, and sacrifice would win over judgment and disdain. I wore that belief like armor, but it wasn't armor at all. It was glass. And every time Linda pushed Bradley into the conversation, every time Emily stayed silent, another crack appeared. But I couldn't see it yet. I was too busy telling myself love would fix everything. It took me longer than I'd like to admit, but eventually the truth sank in. My patience wasn't winning Linda over, it was feeding the fire. Every time I sat there quietly while she praised Bradley, I was teaching her it was safe to humiliate me. Every time I forced a smile when she mocked my work or my truck, I was telling her my pride was expendable. I thought I was showing strength, proving I could endure anything for Emily's sake. But what I was really proving was that I could be walked on. And Linda took full advantage. Her comments grew sharper, her comparisons bolder. What started as subtle digs turned into open jabs, delivered with that smile that never reached her eyes. I told myself it was temporary, that love required endurance. But deep down, a knot was forming in my gut, whispering what I didn't want to admit. I wasn't earning her respect. I was surrendering it. Through it all, the part that cut deepest wasn't Linda's insults. It was Emily's silence. She never once stood up for me. Not when her mother made cracks about my education, not when she ridiculed my truck, not when she practically paraded Bradley's resume at the dinner table. Emily would reach for my hand under the table, squeeze it like a secret apology, her eyes saying, "Please, just let it go." Later in private, she'd whisper, "You know how Mom is. She just wants what's best for me." But what about what was best for us? What about protecting the man she claimed to love? A simple, "Mom, that's enough," could have changed everything. But the words never came. Instead, Emily chose peace at the table and guilt in the car ride home. And in that choice, she showed me the truth I didn't want to face. When it came to choosing between keeping her mother happy and defending me, I never stood a chance. It started small, little coincidences that didn't feel like coincidences at all. Emily and I would grab lunch downtown, and there he was, Bradley Prescott, strolling past the cafe like he just happened to be in the neighborhood. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Bradley would show up by the fresh produce, smiling that polished smile, shaking hands like a politician. Even at Emily's work events, places I knew he had no reason to be, somehow, he'd drop by. At first I tried to laugh it off. Dallas is a big city, sure, but maybe the circles overlap, maybe it's just chance. But when the same man shows up 3 times in 1 week, in places he shouldn't even know we'd be, it stops being chance. Linda, of course, acted like it was the most delightful surprise every time. "Oh, Bradley, what are the odds?" she'd gush, as if the whole thing wasn't scripted. Meanwhile, I sat there realizing the game wasn't subtle anymore. Sunday brunch used to be our thing. Emily and I would pick a spot, sometimes a greasy spoon diner, sometimes a trendy cafe, and spend the late morning together, just us. It was one of the few times in the week where I felt like the world slowed down. But soon, even that got hijacked. One Sunday, Linda suggested we all go out together. By all, she meant me, Emily, her, and of course, Bradley. Suddenly, my quiet mornings turned into staged performances. Linda would make sure Bradley sat across from Emily, lining them up like actors she was directing in some twisted play. Bradley would talk about million-dollar deals between bites of Eggs Benedict, and Linda would nod proudly, hanging on every word. Emily would laugh a little too hard at his stories, ask a few too many questions, and I'd be left stirring my coffee, wondering when brunch stopped being about us. It wasn't brunch anymore, it was recruitment. and I was the outsider at my own table. It was subtle at first, just a phrase here and there. One night while we were watching TV, Emily turned to me and asked, "Jack, have you ever thought about diversifying your income streams?" The words didn't sound like her. They sounded like Bradley. I'd heard him use that exact phrase at brunch, talking about real estate and investments like he was teaching a class. Soon it kept happening. She'd mention long-term growth when I talked about expanding the shop. She'd ask about my 5-year plan, like she was reading from his playbook. These weren't Emily's thoughts. They were echoes. I wanted to shake her, make her see it. This wasn't her voice, it was his. But instead, I smiled tightly and said I was focused on fixing cars and keeping my business strong. Inside, though, I felt it, the ground shifting. I wasn't just losing Emily's attention, I was losing her mind to someone else's words. One evening, after yet another coincidental dinner where Bradley just happened to show up, I couldn't hold it in anymore. We were back at Emily's apartment, her heels kicked off by the couch, and I said it straight. "Emily, your mom is setting you up. This isn't friendship, it's matchmaking. Bradley doesn't just appear out of thin air, she's orchestrating this." Emily froze, then gave me that patient, condescending look like I was overreacting. "Jack, you're being paranoid. Mom just likes having friends. Bradley's dating someone anyway." 2 weeks later, conveniently, Bradley was taking a break to focus on his career, and suddenly he was freer than ever to keep popping up in our lives. I pressed again. "This isn't coincidence, Emily. It's a plan." She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "Why can't you just be confident enough not to feel threatened?" That line hit harder than any insult Linda ever threw at me. She didn't see the setup. She saw me as insecure. I'll never forget the way she said it, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "If you were confident in us, you wouldn't feel threatened." Just like that, the whole conversation turned. Suddenly, it wasn't about her mother pushing Bradley into our lives. It wasn't about the carefully staged coincidences or the way she echoed his words. No, now it was about my supposed insecurity. I sat there stunned, wondering how pointing out the obvious had somehow made me the villain. I wasn't jealous of Bradley, I was furious at the manipulation happening right in front of us. But Emily's logic was airtight in her own mind. If I had a problem, it must mean I wasn't strong enough to handle our relationship. And for a moment, I almost believed her. I started questioning myself, wondering if maybe I was being too possessive, too suspicious. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't paranoid. I was being replaced. One Sunday brunch at a time. That's the cruel thing about gaslighting. You start to doubt what you know in your gut. After Emily threw that line at me, I caught myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, asking questions I'd never asked before. Am I being insecure? Am I imagining things? Maybe Bradley really is just friendly. Maybe Linda truly just wants more people around. I replayed every coincidence in my head, trying to convince myself it was random. I tried to ignore the way Emily's eyes lit up when Bradley talked about his latest deal, or how she leaned in a little too closely when he spoke. I told myself I was reading into things, projecting fears that weren't there. But deep down, the knot in my stomach kept tightening. I knew what I saw, what I felt. Still, instead of trusting my instincts, I silenced them. I started questioning me, while Bradley kept showing up, smiling like he'd already won. The breaking point came with the Houston Children's Hospital Charity Gala. It was Linda's crown jewel, black ties, crystal chandeliers, the whole Dallas-Houston social ladder in one ballroom. She'd been talking about it for weeks, bragging about the table she bought, dropping hints about all the important people Emily and I would meet. But life doesn't stop for galas. My brother Ryan had hit rock bottom with his gambling problem. Not the kind you shake off. This was dangerous. He owed money to men who didn't send polite reminders. They sent broken kneecaps. He called me at 2 a.m, voice shaking, begging for help. I couldn't ignore that. Family comes first. So instead of tuxedos and champagne, I was driving Ryan to the airport, getting him out of Texas before his debt collectors caught up. I told Emily I couldn't make the gala. Her face fell, and all I could think was, she wasn't worried about my brother's life. She was worried about disappointing her mother. When I told Emily I couldn't go, she hesitated, calculating like she always did when her mother's approval was on the line. Then she nodded. "Okay, I'll go with my parents, but you owe me for this." So Friday night, while I was sitting in a terminal at DFW making sure Ryan got safely onto his one-way flight out of Texas, Emily was slipping into a black dress and stepping into Linda's world without me. She sent me pictures. Her with her parents under the chandeliers, her holding a champagne flute, that bright camera-ready smile plastered on her face. But behind it, I noticed something missing. Her eyes didn't look alive. They looked like performance. The last text came at 11:30 p.m. Having fun. Miss you. See you tomorrow. 3 exclamation points. Emily never used exclamation points. That text felt like overcompensation, a cover. I didn't know it yet, but that night at the gala would burn everything we had to the ground. The morning after the gala, I expected a call, at least a text asking how Ryan was doing. Nothing. By noon, I was checking my phone every 5 minutes. By evening, I was calling her straight to voicemail. When she finally answered the next day, her voice sounded distant, hollow. Hey, sorry I didn't call back. I've just been sick. Must have been the food. Food poisoning. From a charity gala serving 5-star catering. I didn't buy it, but I played along. Want me to come over? I asked. No, I don't want you catching it too. Rain check. Rain check. Emily had never asked me for a rain check, not once in 4 years. She used to beg me to come over when she had nothing worse than a hangover. That week, she became a ghost of herself. Short phone calls, rushed dinners, a guilty energy that hung around her like smoke. Something happened that night, and I knew exactly who was at the center of it. The distance only grew. Emily still picked up when I called, but her voice was clipped, every answer trimmed short like she was afraid of saying too much. When we met, it was always in public places, coffee shops, busy lunch spots, never the comfort of her apartment where we used to spend whole weekends together. Her texts turned cold, mechanical. Where she once sent me little jokes, memes, or random miss you messages, now it was just, busy today. Not feeling well. Talk later. She claimed she was sick, headaches, nausea, probably a stomach bug. But the excuses stacked up like bad poker hands, each one weaker than the last. And every time her phone buzzed, she'd tense up, turn it face down, then force a smile like nothing happened. I wasn't blind. I knew when someone was hiding something. And as much as I didn't want to believe it, my gut told me the truth. The gala hadn't made her sick. It had poisoned what we had. It happened on a Tuesday evening. I was elbow deep in the engine of a BMW, grease on my hands, sweat dripping down my back when Emily walked into the shop unannounced. She never came by without a call. That alone set alarms off in my head. She stood there by the toolbox, fidgeting, pale, eyes darting everywhere but at me. Finally, she blurted it out. Jack, I'm pregnant. The wrench slipped from my hand and clattered onto the concrete like a gunshot. For a few seconds, I just stared at her, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something else. Pregnant? With me? With us? My mind raced, but my body froze. 4 years together, careful, cautious, and now, suddenly, this? She rushed into explanations. 6 weeks. The doctor says it's normal I've been feeling so sick. I know it's a shock, but maybe it's a blessing? But all I could hear was silence in my chest. A silence that felt like the end of everything. 6 weeks, she said again, too quickly, like she'd practiced the line in front of a mirror. Her eyes searched my face, waiting for me to light up with excitement, maybe even relief. But instead, I started doing math. 6 weeks ago, that was right around the gala. The very night I was driving my brother to the airport, saving his life, while Emily was in a ballroom full of champagne, chandeliers, and Bradley Prescott. The dates lined up a little too perfectly. Not impossible for it to be mine, but close enough to reek of convenience. My gut clenched with the kind of certainty numbers don't lie about. I didn't explode, didn't accuse her. Instead, I nodded slowly and asked, "How are you feeling? Morning sickness?" She looked relieved, like I'd passed some kind of test. But inside, I wasn't celebrating. I was calculating. And every calculation told me the same story. That child couldn't be mine. As Emily sat there rambling about doctor visits and baby names, my mind went somewhere else entirely, back 2 years. 2 years earlier, after one of our short breakups, I'd made a decision. Kids? Sure, someday. But not then. So I went to a clinic in Dallas and had a vasectomy. Quiet, clean, permanent enough to buy time, reversible if I ever chose to be a father later. I never told Emily, not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't want her to feel pressure. I figured when we were ready, I'd get it reversed and we'd start a family the right way. But now, that secret was the loudest truth in the room. 6 weeks pregnant? Impossible. I couldn't father a child. Not then, not now. Emily was carrying someone else's baby, and she was looking me in the eye, trying to sell me the lie that it was mine. On the outside, I kept my face calm, nodding, asking the right questions, even offering to go with her to the next appointment. But inside, I already knew. That baby wasn't mine. Couldn't be mine. It wasn't just the vasectomy, though that was the ironclad proof. It was the way Emily said 6 weeks like a script, the way she avoided my eyes, the way every excuse since the gala had lined up like dominoes, all falling toward this moment. I didn't need a DNA test to feel the truth in my bones. My gut told me what my heart didn't want to accept. The night I was saving my brother, someone else was with the woman I loved. And now, she was trying to pass the consequence on to me. I smiled, told her we'd figure it out together. But in my chest, something had already died. I've always believed in fixing things the right way. Cars, relationships, even life's messes. You don't guess, you diagnose. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't just accuse Emily without proof. She'd deny it, twist it, maybe even convince herself I was the crazy one. So I made a decision. I was going to get evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable proof. I started small, watching the little details I'd ignored before. The way she clutched her phone, how she angled the screen away from me, how her fingers flew when she thought I wasn't looking. Every buzz made her tense like she was hiding a bomb in her pocket. At night, when she fell asleep next to me, I lay awake, the weight of the truth pressing on my chest. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I wanted clarity. And once I had it, once I held the truth in my hands, there'd be no coming back. For her, or for us. The first crack came by accident. Emily had left her phone charging on the nightstand while she showered. A notification lit up the screen, an iCloud voicemail sync. Curiosity or survival, I don't know which pushed me, but I tapped it. Her voice filled the room, shaky, panicked. Simone, I messed up. I messed up so bad. I slept with Bradley at the gala and now I'm pregnant. Jack's going to leave me if he finds out. What am I supposed to do? Maybe if I time it right, maybe I can make him think it's his. I froze. My chest burned, but my hands were ice cold. There it was, truth straight from her lips, recorded like evidence in a trial. I replayed it twice just to be sure my ears weren't lying. But they weren't. The woman I'd loved for 4 years had betrayed me, and was planning to trap me with another man's child. The voicemail alone was enough to destroy everything, but fate wasn't done handing me ammunition. A few nights later, while Emily dozed off next to me, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a group chat sync through iCloud, messages she'd been copied on but never deleted. I opened them, and my blood ran cold. It was Linda, texting with Eleanor Prescott, Bradley's mother. Bradley is very interested in Emily, Eleanor wrote. Perhaps we should arrange more opportunities for them to spend time together. Linda's reply was the dagger. I couldn't agree more. Jack, he's sweet, but Marcus isn't security enough. Emily needs someone who can provide real stability. Bradley would be perfect for her. They weren't even subtle about it. They were planning my replacement like it was a business merger. I took screenshots of everything. Timestamps, names, the entire ugly conversation. Proof, undeniable and clear. I was never just losing Emily. I was being pushed out of her life by design. By then, I had more than enough to end it. The voicemail, the screenshots, the timeline that didn't lie. But I wasn't going to just walk away. Not this time. If Emily, Linda, and Bradley wanted to treat my life like some chessboard, then I'd end the game with a checkmate. So I gathered everything, every piece of evidence into one folder. The voicemail transcribed and saved, screenshots of Linda and Eleanor's smug little texts, even my own medical records. I went back to the Dallas clinic where I'd had my vasectomy and requested certified copies. Dates, signatures, post-op notes, everything stamped official. The kind of proof no one could argue against. Then I organized it all, digital and paper, like I was prepping for trial. Because in a way I was. I wasn't just going to confront Emily. I was going to expose the entire scheme in one blow, in front of everyone who thought they could play me. And I knew exactly where I'd do it. If they wanted a performance, I'd give them one. But it wouldn't be the kind Linda Carter had scripted. I called Harold, Emily's dad, the only sane voice in that family, and told him I wanted to treat everyone to dinner. To celebrate the pregnancy properly, I said. He sounded thrilled. I could practically hear the pride in his voice. Perfect. I booked a private table at Chamberlain's Steakhouse in Dallas. White tablecloths, aged bourbon, the kind of place Linda loved because it screamed wealth and status. I wanted her comfortable, unguarded, convinced she was winning. Meanwhile, I packed my arsenal. The Bluetooth speaker loaded with Emily's voicemail, the printed screenshots of Linda and Eleanor's scheming, and the certified vasectomy records tucked neatly in my jacket. I wasn't coming for an argument. I was coming for a demolition. One clean strike that would topple their whole house of lies in front of the very family they'd tried to impress. This dinner would be the end game. Before anything else, I needed Robert on board. He'd always been the opposite of Linda. Quiet, hardworking, a man who understood sweat on your hands meant pride, not shame. If anyone deserved to know the truth, it was him. So I picked up the phone. "Robert, I want to do something special," I told him. "A family dinner at Chamberlain's. Celebrate the pregnancy right, make it official. My treat." There was a pause, then warmth in his voice. "That's a fine idea, Jack. I know Linda will love it. She's been waiting for a moment like this." Yeah, I bet she had. Robert promised to gather the family, Emily, Linda, her sister, even a couple of cousins. Exactly the audience I wanted. When I hung up, I sat back and exhaled. The trap was set. Robert thought he was arranging a celebration. What I was really arranging was the night their illusions shattered, and none of them saw it coming. The night of the dinner, I treated it like a trial, because in a way it was. My evidence was ready, my witnesses gathered, and the verdict already sealed. All that was left was the performance. I shaved close, got a fresh haircut, and put on the charcoal gray suit Emily had once picked out for me. The same one she said made me look like I belonged in boardrooms instead of under car hoods. I polished my boots until they shone, not flashy, just sharp, clean, controlled. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a mechanic. I saw a man walking into battle with the truth as his weapon. Calm, steady, unshakable. I slipped the Bluetooth speaker into my pocket, slid the folder of documents under my arm, and walked out the door. By the time I pulled up to Chamberlain's, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was ready. Tonight, the masks would come off. When I walked into Chamberlain's, the whole Carter family was already seated. Robert gave me a firm handshake, warm and steady. Emily's cousins smiled politely. But Linda? She was practically glowing, her pearls catching the light like spotlights. She thought tonight was the night. The way she looked at me, smug, expectant, victorious, it was clear she believed I was about to propose. I could almost hear her rehearsing the story she'd tell her friends, how her daughter finally secured her future with a man she'd molded into shape. Even Emily looked nervous but hopeful, fidgeting with her napkin, stealing glances at me like she was bracing for a ring. The waiter poured wine, small talk floated around the table, and under it all, I could feel the tension, thick and unspoken. They thought I was here to kneel, but I hadn't come with a ring. I'd come with a verdict. At first, the dinner felt almost normal. Steak sizzling, wine flowing, polite laughter bouncing around the table. Robert asked about the shop, Emily's aunt complimented the decor, and for a moment, it almost felt like family. Then, right on cue, Linda leaned in with that polished smile of hers. "You know, Bradley just closed on another property in Houston. Prime location, such a brilliant investment." The table stilled. She said his name like she was sprinkling seasoning on the meal, certain everyone would be impressed. Emily's cheeks flushed pink, eyes darting to her plate. I sat back in my chair, watching the performance. This was her endgame. Slide Bradley's name in, paint him as the model of stability, and remind the whole family of the life Emily could have had. What Linda didn't know was that her favorite topic had just become my opening act, and I was seconds away from changing the script. Linda was still glowing, swirling her wine as she gushed about Bradley's unmatched potential, when I reached into my jacket. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled out a small black Bluetooth speaker and set it right in the middle of the table, between the breadbasket and Robert's glass of bourbon. The chatter faltered. Emily's fork froze midair. Robert raised an eyebrow. "What's this, Jack?" Linda asked, her voice syrupy sweet, though her eyes narrowed. I smiled politely. "Thought we could use a little ambiance, some music to set the mood." She chuckled, actually chuckled, like I was trying too hard to impress. How thoughtful. I paired my phone, the soft chime confirming the connection. My pulse was steady, my breathing even. This wasn't nerves, it was clarity. I looked around the table, letting the silence stretch, then said evenly, I made a playlist. Songs that capture exactly how I've been feeling lately. And then, with one tap, Emily's own voice filled the room. Emily's voice burst from the tiny speaker, shaky but crystal clear. Simone, I messed up. I messed up so bad. I slept with Bradley at the gala, and now I'm pregnant. Jack's going to leave me if he finds out. What am I supposed to do? Maybe if I time it right, maybe I can make him think it's his. The restaurant went silent. You could hear silverware clink against plates 3 tables over. Robert's jaw dropped, his hand tightening around his glass. Emily's aunt gasped, covering her mouth. And Emily, she went pale, eyes wide like she'd been struck. Linda's wineglass froze halfway up, her lips parting but no words coming out. I leaned back, calm as stone, watching them all absorb it. No accusations, no shouting, just Emily's own voice cutting through every lie. The truth was finally on the table, and for the first time in 4 years I felt free. The last word of Emily's voicemail echoed into the hush, and then, nothing. Absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the white tablecloth. Emily sat frozen, eyes glassy, her lips trembling but no sound coming out. Robert stared at her like he didn't recognize his own daughter. Across from me, her aunt and uncle shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to look at their plates or at me. Linda was the only one who tried to recover. She cleared her throat, forcing a laugh that came out brittle. That could have been taken out of context, surely, but her voice cracked before she could finish. She knew the performance was over. I didn't speak. Not yet. I wanted the weight of that silence to press on every single one of them, to let them feel what I'd felt for weeks. Doubt, betrayal, suffocating truth. And then, slowly, I reached into my jacket again. I pulled out a small stack of printed screenshots, crisp and neatly clipped, and laid them on the table like evidence in a courtroom. The paper slid across the white cloth toward Robert. If the voicemail wasn't clear enough, I said evenly, here's a little side reading. Robert picked them up, his brows furrowing as he scanned the messages. I didn't wait for him to finish. I read them aloud so the entire table could hear. Bradley is very interested in Emily, Eleanor Prescott wrote. Perhaps we should arrange more opportunities for them to get acquainted. Then Linda's reply, sharp as a knife. I couldn't agree more. Jack is sweet, but he isn't security enough. Emily needs someone who can provide real stability. Bradley would be perfect. Robert's face turned red, his fist slamming against the table hard enough to rattle the glasses. Emily flinched. Linda's mask cracked, her smile gone, her eyes wild. And I still wasn't finished. Robert's fist still trembled against the table, his knuckles white. He turned slowly toward his wife, his voice low at first but sharp enough to cut through the stunned silence. You did this, Linda stammered, shaking her head. Robert, listen, I was only trying to... He slammed the table again, silverware jumping. Trying to what? Destroy your own daughter's life? Manipulate her like a pawn just to impress your country club friends? The color drained from Linda's face. I wanted her to have security. Security? Robert barked. You call this security? Pushing her into the arms of a man who doesn't love her? Letting her cheat on the one man who actually cared for her? That's not security, Linda. That's betrayal. To Emily. To me. To this whole damn family. The restaurant had gone dead quiet, other tables watching. Emily covered her face, tears streaking down her cheeks. But I wasn't done. My final card was still waiting. The room was already shaking under Robert's fury, Emily's sobs, and Linda's collapsing mask. That's when I reached into my jacket one last time and pulled out a manila folder. I laid it gently on the table, sliding it next to the untouched breadbasket. Here's the part none of you saw coming, I said, my voice calm, almost steady enough to be cruel. I opened the folder, revealing stamped medical documents. 2 years ago, I had a vasectomy, done at Dallas Medical Center. Certified, confirmed, irreversible unless I chose otherwise. I looked straight at Emily, whose face was now as pale as the tablecloth. So that baby you're carrying? I leaned back, my voice cutting through the air like a verdict. It isn't mine. It never could be. Not in this lifetime. The silence that followed was deafening. Shock, disbelief, shame, all crashing over the table in waves. The truth had landed, and it was nuclear. The table was chaos. Linda sputtering excuses, Emily sobbing into her hands, Robert sitting in stunned silence, his chest heaving like a man whose world had just caved in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply reached into my wallet, pulled out 2 crisp $100 bills, and laid them neatly beside my plate. "For dinner," I said, my voice steady, almost gentle. "Mine and hers. She's going to need it more than me." Every eye at the table locked on me as I pushed back my chair. The scrape of wood against tile sounded like a gunshot in the quiet restaurant. I looked at Emily one last time, her mascara running, her shoulders shaking, and then at Linda, still clutching her wine glass like it could save her. "Congratulations," I added, calm as stone. "You wanted money over love. Too bad Bradley doesn't buy damaged goods." And with that, I walked out into the Dallas night, leaving 4 years behind me like ashes. I hadn't even made it home when my phone lit up, Robert's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something in me knew I had to. His voice was gravel, heavy with decades of frustration. "Jack, I owe you an apology. Hell, I owe you 100 of them. I should have stopped this months ago. Should have stood up to Linda before she poisoned everything." I could hear shouting in the background, Emily crying, Linda's voice shrill, the whole house crumbling like a bad play with the curtains ripped open. Then Robert said the words that stunned me more than anything else that night. "I filed for divorce this morning. 43 years of marriage, and she threw it away chasing status and money. I can't look at her anymore." I sat there in my truck, silent, realizing the blast radius of Linda's scheme had gone further than I imagined. It hadn't just destroyed me and Emily, it had torn her entire family apart. If there was ever any doubt about Bradley Prescott's character, it vanished right after the truth came out. The golden boy of Houston, the man Linda had worshipped like he was salvation itself, disappeared. No calls, no visits, no promises. One moment he was orbiting Emily like a prize to be won, and the next, he was gone, leaving her alone to face the wreckage. Rumor had it his mother, Eleanor, put her foot down. A scandal was bad enough, but raising a child that wasn't planned? That didn't fit into the Prescott brand. So Bradley did what came naturally to him. Cut ties and ran. Emily, who once looked at him like he was her ticket to belonging, was left holding nothing but a broken reputation and a pregnancy that was never supposed to be mine. Linda had bet her daughter's future on Bradley's money, and in the end, he treated Emily like just another property deal he could walk away from. Without Bradley to cling to, Emily's world caved in fast. The confident, polished woman who once walked into rooms glowing with approval now looked hollowed out, like someone had switched off her light. She quit her job at the marketing firm, too drained, too distracted to keep up appearances. Bills piled up. The apartment she once bragged about slipped out of reach. And so, with nowhere else to go, she moved back into her mother's house. Linda, still smarting from Robert's divorce papers, wasn't the same queen bee anymore, but she clung to Emily like a drowning woman clutching driftwood, feeding her daughter just enough support to keep her dependent. From the outside, it looked like karma had finally collected its debt. Emily had traded love for status, loyalty for convenience, and now she was left with neither. I should have felt pity, but all I felt was distance. Her collapse wasn't mine to fix anymore. For years, Linda Carter thrived on reputation. She was the woman with the pearls, the country club luncheons, the carefully curated image of Dallas sophistication. But after that dinner, the story spread faster than wildfire. Whispers started at the clubs, the boutiques, the charity circles she lived for. People didn't just gossip about Emily's scandal. They gossiped about Linda's role in it. How she'd schemed, how she'd pushed her daughter into the arms of Bradley Prescott, only to watch him vanish the second things got messy. The queen bee of Dallas society became a cautionary tale. Invitations dried up. Smiles turned sharp. Even her closest friends kept their distance, not wanting to be tainted by her disaster. Robert's divorce filing sealed her fate. The woman who once boasted about security now faced the world with nothing but a crumbling reputation and a daughter whose life she'd shattered. And the worst part? Everyone knew it was Linda's own doing. Leaving that steakhouse felt like walking out of a burning building. Behind me, smoke and chaos. In front of me, cool Dallas night air. For 4 years, I'd lived inside that fire. Constant judgment, Linda's cutting remarks, Emily's silence, the slow suffocation of love poisoned by control. And in one night, I'd ripped the walls down and stepped free. I didn't look back. Not at Emily sobbing, not at Linda crumbling, not at Robert staring at the ruins of his marriage. Their collapse wasn't mine to carry anymore. When the door shut behind me, I took my first deep breath in months. It wasn't joy, not exactly. More like relief. The kind you feel when you realize the worst already happened, and you survived. I'd lost a woman I thought I'd marry, but I'd saved myself from a lifetime of lies, and that I decided was worth every scar. After the firestorm, I did the only thing I knew how, went back to work. The garage became my sanctuary. The smell of motor oil, the clang of tools, the hum of engines, those were honest sounds, not lies whispered over wine glasses. Word got around fast. My crew, guys who'd been with me for years, closed ranks. Wayne, my best mechanic, clapped me on the shoulder the first Monday back. "You're better off, brother. Trust me." His wife, Carla, brought over dinner that night and said flatly, "She never looked at you the way a woman in love should." They didn't pity me. They respected me. They knew I'd stood my ground when it mattered. Work piled in, customers kept coming, and for the first time in months I felt solid again. Every car I fixed, every problem I solved reminded me I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. Her name was Sarah Lawson, a veterinarian who'd been bringing her beat-up Honda Civic to my shop for years. I'd seen her dozens of times before, jeans smudged from the clinic, hair tied back, a smile that reached her eyes. But I'd been too wrapped up in Emily's world to notice. One afternoon, she dropped off her car for a transmission job and stayed to talk while I worked. No pretense, no judgment, just real conversation. She laughed at her own jokes, asked me questions like she genuinely cared about the answers. And when she noticed the grease on my hands, she didn't wrinkle her nose. She grinned and said, "Guess we both save lives in our own way." For the first time in a long time, I felt something simple and pure, peace. With Sarah, there was no performance, no pedestal, no test to pass, just two people who respected the work in each other's hands. And that, I realized, was real love. Being with Sarah taught me something I should have known all along. Love isn't a grand gesture or a flashy ring. It isn't climbing some social ladder or impressing people who don't matter. Love is showing up every day. It's Sarah bringing me coffee when I'd been up late fixing a stubborn Porsche. It's me tightening the belt on her old Civic so she could make her morning rounds without worry. It's quiet dinners where we laughed about nothing, and the comfort of knowing we didn't have to perform for anyone. With Emily, love had been conditional, measured, tested, always weighed against someone else's definition of enough. With Sarah, love was steady, honest, no strings, no judgment, just presence. I realized then, the truest kind of love doesn't demand you prove yourself. It simply shows up, every single day, in small ways that add up to forever. It was a gray afternoon when Emily showed up at my shop, 6 months pregnant, eyes red, hair a mess, wearing one of my old hoodies she'd never returned. She stood in the doorway like a ghost of the life I'd left behind. "Jack, please," she whispered, her voice cracked. "Can we just talk? I made a mistake. I still love you. We can fix this. Raise the baby together." I set my wrench down, wiped the grease from my hands, and looked her straight in the eye. "No, Emily. You loved me only when it was easy, when it meant flowers on Fridays and dinners on Main Street. But the moment it got hard, you chose someone else. That's not love." Her lip trembled. She reached out, but I stepped back. "I'm done carrying this. Goodbye, Emily." I turned and walked away, the sound of the shop door closing behind me sealing it once and for all. Looking back, I see it clearly now. Real love isn't about status, bank accounts, or the approval of people sitting at country clubs. Real love isn't conditional. It doesn't vanish the moment life gets hard. Emily taught me what love isn't. Sarah showed me what love truly is. Not flashy, not staged, just two people showing up for each other, every single day. Money can buy you houses, cars, vacations, even a seat at the fanciest tables in Dallas. But it can't buy loyalty, it can't buy trust, and it damn sure can't buy love. I walked away from betrayal and found peace in honesty. That's the lesson I want you to take from my story. Love with conditions isn't love, it's just a transaction. Real love is unconditional, steady, and true. If you believe real love is built on honesty, comment real love below. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply living well with the right person.